Welcome, listener, in the shadows. We bring stories into the light. Join me as we explore the encounters no one speaks of and the things that watch from the dark. If you're still here after all that, you already know the kind of stories we tell. The kind that crawl under your skin, that echo in the quiet when the episode ends. If you want to carry a piece of that darkness with you, wear what haunts you. Our exclusive line of merch is made for listeners who feel more at home in the uncanny, the unspoken, the things that don't make sense in the daylight. Shirts, hoodies, and other gear, designed with that same atmosphere of dread, mystery, and whispered wrongness. Candles support the channel, feed the stories. You can grab yours at https:// the shadows printify me, and as always, don't look behind you. The last voyage of the wake. Something in the water wanted us gone. Chapter 1. The weight of water. The sea has a way of shrinking you. Out here, past the continental shelf where the water runs black and bottomless, you learn just how small a human being really is. The air tastes like rust and brine. The deck slick with seawater no matter how many times you swab it. At night, when the sky smothers itself in cloud and there are no stars, the ocean is nothing but a single vast, breathing darkness that presses against the hull with a low, endless groan. Our boat isn't much. 40 feet of salt-stained fiberglass patched more times than I can count. The Asterian, painted on her side in flaking blue letters, a name that might have been meant as a prayer or maybe a joke. She wasn't built for comfort. The bunks are narrow as coffins, the galley smells permanently of fried oil and damp clothes, and the engine shudders like a smoker's lungs. But she's held together, and that's what matters. There are 6 of us aboard. Captain Soren, who's been running lines longer than I've been alive, with a beard that looks carved out of stone. Malik, wiry and restless, who hums when he works off-key, like he's trying to fill the silence. Alva, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, who ties knots faster than anyone else I've seen. The twins, Jarrow and Ilya, who share jokes in low mutters that no one else can hear. And me, the youngest, still green enough that my hands crack open from salt and rope burn. The work leaves little room for thought. Hands numb, shoulders aching, you bait the lines, haul them back, gut what's worth keeping, toss the rest to the gulls. The gulls scream for it, ragged white shapes circling above us, their eyes like small coins reflecting the running lights. Sometimes they vanish all at once, gone into the horizon without sound, and the silence they leave behind is worse than their cries. Nights are the hardest. The wind slides under your coat no matter how tightly you pull it shut. You can't see where the horizon ends or where the sea begins. It all bleeds together in an infinite pitch. The only sound is the groaning of the rigging and the low churn of the sea. I try not to look too long over the railing. It isn't the height that unsettles me, but the thought of what lies below. Because the water isn't empty. It never is. Sometimes when we pull the nets up, they come heavy, too heavy. You brace yourself, dig your heels in, and the winch creaks like it's about to tear itself from the deck. You think it's a haul, a gift from the deep, but when the net breaks the surface, it's nothing but tatters, shredded as though pulled through razors. The fish that do make it back are sometimes split clean down the belly, guts missing, as though something cut them open just to see what was inside. Captain Soren says it's sharks. He says it's always sharks. But even sharks don't work this clean. Hooks torn out as though by fingers. Lines gnawed through in patterns too neat for teeth. Last week, Alva swore she felt something tug back. Once, twice, deliberate, as though something was on the other end of the line, testing her strength. The arguments start as jokes. Sea monster got hungry. Old Poseidon wants a tax. But the laughter doesn't last. The twins stopped laughing altogether when we lost half a catch in one night. Just gone, as if the water swallowed it whole before we could even start to haul. I keep telling myself it's natural, that the ocean has always been cruel, and we're just ants poking at it with hooks and steel. But still, I've noticed the way the water moves when I lean over the rail. How sometimes, in the lantern light, I catch a slickness passing under the surface. Not a fish, not a shark. Too large, too fast, something that moves with intent. It feels like being watched. And that, more than the torn nets, more than the gutted fish, is what's begun to hollow out my chest every night. The idea that somewhere below, in that endless dark, something is learning us, learning how we fish, how we work, how we sleep, and maybe, just maybe, learning how to pull us down too. Chapter 2, Nets in the Dark. The second night out was always the hardest. By then the novelty of departure had worn off, the land had faded into memory, and the body had begun to ache in a way that no sleep seemed able to fix. Salt dried on the skin, clothes clung damp against the back, and even the air tasted metallic, like pennies rolling across the tongue. We'd set the nets again, miles from shore, in waters that looked almost black under the moon. They stretched out from the stern like a spider's web in the tide, vanishing into nothingness. My gloves were stiff with brine, and every time the rope hissed through my grip, it burned through to the bone. A silence hung over the deck that wasn't quite natural. You could always hear the sea, but when a crew goes quiet, you hear something else, the listening. Men pretending not to notice that they're waiting for something. The first sign came just after midnight. I'd been hauling slack when the rope jerked so suddenly, it nearly wrenched me forward over the rail. "Jesus," I hissed, planting my boots. The line thrummed like a plucked wire. Not the clumsy struggle of a trapped fish, not the tearing pull of a shark bite. This was something measured, steady, as if the net itself had been taken in hand. From the bow, Nolan shouted, "You good back there?" I didn't answer right away. The rope gave another slow tug, deliberate, like someone testing my grip. "I don't like that," I muttered, more to myself than anyone. "Don't like what?" He came striding down the deck, slicker flapping in the wind, face carved with irritation and curiosity both. Nolan was the youngest after me, but carried himself like an old salt who'd seen everything. He gave the rope a look, then me. "What's the problem? Feels like a big one. Doesn't feel right." I kept my hand on it, the vibration crawling through the gloves. "It's too clean," Nolan snorted. "Fish are fish, mate. They don't pull polite." He braced beside me, hauling. "Come on, help me get it up." We heaved together, but the line went slack the moment we tried. A fool's give, sudden as a trick door swinging open. When the net surfaced, its edge was in tatters, not torn like teeth would do, not shredded by rocks or current. It looked cut. Nolan frowned, holding up one length. The fibers ended in blunt strands, as though sliced and frayed by something sharp. Behind us, Captain Rourke's boots thudded across the deck. He was built like the hull itself, broad, scarred, meant to weather storms. He squinted at the net with a single glance. "Sharks," he said. "Probably a pack, nothing to worry about." "Sharks don't cut lines like this," I said, unable to help myself. He turned his eyes on me. They were pale and hard like old glass. "And what do you reckon it was, son? Mermaids?" A few of the others chuckled, though not heartily. Nolan shook his head, lips tight. "Doesn't look like sharks, Cap." Rourke's jaw flexed. "Doesn't matter what it looks like. Out here, we don't invent stories. Sharks, end of it." He turned away, but I caught a flicker in his gaze, not dismissal, not really. Something more like recognition, as if he'd seen this before. The crew worked in silence after that. We gathered the shredded net, laid it in a heap on the deck, patched what we could. Each of us stealing glances at the dark water, at the pale foam curling against the hull. The ocean seemed thicker somehow, a living thing breathing just beneath us. By the time dawn rose grey and thin, no one spoke of it again. But I noticed none of us leaned against the rail the way we usually did. No one hummed sea shanties or cracked half-jokes. We kept to the middle of the deck, eyes down, as though afraid something beneath the waves might notice if we looked too long. And when I finally lay down in my bunk, I swore I could still feel it. That pull on the rope, not frantic, not wild, but deliberate, like a hand trying to learn mine. Chapter 3. The third night was the kind of dark that seemed alive, like the sky and sea had made some secret pact to smother us whole. No moon, no stars, just the slap of black water and the hiss of the generator, keeping the deck lights burning against the void. I'd never realized how small the Signet was until then. She'd always felt sturdy enough, cramped but honest, a vessel that had carried more men and fish than anyone could count. But that night, lit only in weak yellow halos, she looked less like a fishing boat and more like a scrap of driftwood waiting to be swallowed. We'd finished hauling the nets for the evening, and the take was meager again. Half the cod gone, the nets torn clean in lines too precise to be chance. Ruiz spat over the rail as he worked a coil of rope back into place, muttering curses about sharks. But none of us really believed sharks anymore. The silence was broken only by the sound of boots on wet planks and the creak of the hull adjusting to the current. Every so often the water would break, not a wave, not the slap of fish, but something heavier, thicker, a body moving below us. It started with ripples, spreading out under the glow of the deck lamps, circles widening until they lapped against the hull. Then, a scrape, faint but sharp, like something brushing metal just beneath the waterline. "Christ," muttered Donnelly, hugging himself against the cold. "Tell me you heard that." "We all heard it," Ruiz said flatly. He didn't look up, just kept fussing with the rope. His hands were moving faster than usual, clumsy almost. Calhoun, the oldest of us, leaned his elbow on the rail and peered into the dark. Could be debris. Could be nothing. "Debris doesn't swim in circles," I said before I could stop myself. The words hung there. No one spoke for a long time. The ocean around us stirred again, slow but deliberate. Something massive moving in wide arcs, pacing us. Every so often, the surface tension would break, a swirl, a shifting shadow under the water just at the edge of the lights. Too fast, too silent, gone before anyone could point it out. Donnelly finally snapped. "This is bullshit," he said, voice tight and rising. "We should head back, report it, call in whatever the hell this is. Nobody's paying us enough to sit out here like chum." Calhoun shot him a look that was half fury, half fear. "You want to go back empty-handed? You want to explain that to the boss, to your families when rent's due? Grow up." "Grow up." Donnelly's laugh was sharp and ugly. "We're being stalked, Cal. Whatever that thing is, it's playing with us. You don't play with fish, you play with prey." The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Even Ruiz stopped fidgeting with the rope. He wouldn't look at anyone. The deck light flickered once, a weak pulse that sent everyone's gaze snapping upward. The hum of the generator wavered, coughed, then steadied again. That momentary dimming left a taste in my mouth, metallic and electric, as though the darkness had almost reached us. And then we heard it. Not a splash, not a scrape, but a sound rising from the black water just off the stern. A long, hollow exhale. Wet, guttural, almost human in its rhythm. Donnelly swore under his breath, backing toward the cabin door. Ruiz muttered a prayer in Spanish. Calhoun kept staring at the stern like if he looked hard enough, he could make sense of it. But there was nothing there. Just the dark water rippling wide, as if something huge had just submerged. The circles widened again, slowly, methodically. It was still there. We stayed frozen for what felt like hours, no one daring to break the silence, waiting for it to rise again. But it never did, not that night. Still, none of us slept. Chapter 4. By the fourth night, none of us were sleeping properly. The bunks felt more like coffins than places of rest. Every creak of the hull, every slap of a wave against steel made me think of that thing circling us, patient as a noose tightening around the neck. The captain ordered the deck lights off that evening. He said we didn't want to draw attention from whatever was out there. The deck became a stage of blackness, the faint green glow of the depth sounder, inside the wheelhouse, the only real light source. I stood with Archero by the rail, nursing a cigarette I didn't want, but smoked anyway just to keep my hands from shaking. The sea was restless, not stormy, but unsettled, a slow, rolling pulse that felt alive. "Sharks, maybe," Archero muttered, like he was trying to convince himself. "Big ones, schooling, you know, like a pack of wolves." I let the smoke hang in my throat a moment before releasing it. Wolves don't unhook fish clean, they don't cut lines like they've got knives. He didn't answer. His face looked grey in the moonlight, the hollows of his cheeks deeper than I remembered. None of us were eating much. Inside the cabin, Jory and the captain were at it again. "We need to turn back," Jory snapped, his voice sharp as glass. "We're losing more than we're catching. It's bad math, Cap, bad odds." Captain Reeves' voice was calm but tight. "A few nets, a few lost catches. You're scaring yourself into shadows. The ocean's got teeth, always has." "Not like this," Jory spat. "I've fished 30 years. I know what a shark looks like, I know what a whale looks like, and I know when something's playing with us. That's what's happening. It's playing." The word sank in. Playing. I realized Archero's hands were clenched so tightly around the rail his knuckles had gone white. Then the water changed. Not in temperature, not in color, in sound. It went quiet. Too quiet. No chop, no hiss of spray, just a low, sucking hush, as though the whole sea had drawn in a breath. "Jesus," Archero whispered. From starboard came a surge, like something rolling just beneath the surface. I leaned over, and for the first time I saw it break. Not a fin, not a shark's tail. A body, smooth, slick, vast, a wall of darkness rising half out of the water before sliding back under in a motion too fluid, too deliberate to belong to a fish. The moonlight skated across wet skin that gleamed like oil. And then it was gone. The water collapsed over it in silence, leaving only rings of ripples too wide for me to track with my eyes. I couldn't breathe. Archero dropped his cigarette into the sea, the ember snuffed instantly. We stood frozen. Inside the cabin, Jory's voice cracked into a scream. "Tell me that was a whale, Cap. Tell me that was a goddamn whale." No one answered, because we all knew better. Chapter 5. By morning, the air tasted stale with unease. Salt and diesel fumes clung to everything, the railings, the deck, even the damp bread in the galley. None of us had gotten much sleep, though nobody wanted to admit it. Harrison was the first to break the silence. He sat at the table, hands wrapped tight around a mug of lukewarm coffee, knuckles pale. "We all saw it," he said finally, voice flat. "Something broke the water last night. Not a shark. Not a damn whale either. You're letting your eyes play tricks on you," Croft muttered from across the galley. He was cleaning a knife that didn't need cleaning, blades scraping against the wood. "Night light, tired heads, shadows. The ocean plays games." "Games don't slam into the hull," Harrison snapped back, louder than he meant. The words hung there, vibrating with his temper. I stayed quiet, chewing on dry bread that tasted like cardboard. He wasn't wrong. Around 3 in the morning, something had hit us hard enough to rattle the mugs in the galley cabinet. The whole boat shuddered, and for a heartbeat, I thought the hull might split. Nobody wanted to talk about that. Boone leaned back in his chair, trying to pass off casual, though his knee bounced restlessly. "All right then, let's say it wasn't a whale. Say it wasn't sharks. What's left? Some giant squid. Kraken come up to say hello." He smirked, but the humor in his voice felt thin, desperate. "Squid don't hit steel hulls, Boone," Harrison said. "And they sure as hell don't circle a boat like that." Croft's knife clattered onto the table. "Enough!" His face was red, the veins in his temple standing out. "You all want to scare yourselves, fine. But don't go spinning ghost stories while we're hundreds of miles from shore. Keep your heads clear." No one answered. When we went back to work on deck, the sea carried a deceptive calm. Low swells rocked us with a slow, steady rhythm, the kind that would normally lull the crew into their routines. But the nets, what was left of them, told another story. They weren't just shredded. The ropes had been twisted, frayed in clean spirals like someone, or something, had taken deliberate care to ruin them. Hooks dangled, bent and empty. Half a dozen fish lay gutted in the scuppers, torn open and discarded like scraps no one wanted. Boone whistled low when he saw. "Christ, that's not sharks." Croft bent down, lifted a mangled fish by the tail and turned it over in his hands. He didn't say anything, but I saw the way his eyes flicked to the water, as if expecting the surface to break again. The silence stretched, broken only by the creak of the rigging. Then Harrison spat over the side. "It's playing with us." The words chilled me more than I wanted to admit. Playing. Testing. By the time night fell again, the whole crew had taken on the look of cornered animals. Every clang of metal, every groan of wood in the swell made someone flinch. The deck lights burned brighter than usual, an attempt at comfort, but it only pushed the dark further back, leaving the black water gleaming like glass. Sometime past midnight, it came again. A sound, not quite a hit, not quite a scrape. A low, dragging thud along the hull, long and slow, as though something enormous were brushing its body against the boat. Harrison stumbled out of his bunk at the noise, bare feet slapping against the deck. "You hear that? It's rubbing on us." Croft barked at him to shut up, but I could see it in his eyes too. He'd heard it. He knew. The ocean outside was still, deceptively so. But in the silence between heartbeats, I swore I felt it. Something vast and deliberate moving just below, keeping time with us, waiting. And in that moment, a thought settled into my chest like an anchor. It wasn't just feeding, it was learning. Chapter 6, Dragged Down. The morning after the hull strike was quiet, too quiet. The sea had that flat, metallic sheen again, the kind that made you feel like you were standing on the lid of something. A lid that could open at any time. The sky was washed in pale grey, horizons smeared into the water until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. We worked slower than usual. None of us said it aloud, but sleep had been scarce. Every noise during the night, the groan of wood, the slosh of waves, had felt amplified, suspect, like a message we weren't equipped to translate. By the time we lowered the nets, even the gulls seemed hesitant to follow, circling wide arcs but keeping their distance. "Looks good out here," Vaughan muttered, squinting into the grey. His voice had an edge of false cheer, the kind that made my skin crawl. "Calm seas, nets down, no goddamn sea monster in sight." "Don't joke," Marco snapped. He was smoking again, shirt clinging to him with sweat despite the cold. "Not after last night." "You think it was the thing?" Vaughan asked. "What else slams the hull like that?" Marco spat over the rail. "Not a shark. Not a whale. Whales breach. They don't crawl under you like they want to roll you over." Captain Henley, who had been coiling rope, paused with his hands still. He didn't look up, but his jaw flexed. "Whatever it is," he said, voice gravel low, "we keep our heads clear, we fish, we watch, we don't panic." Easy words. They didn't touch the knot in my stomach. It was just past noon when we hauled the first net back, or tried to. The winch screamed, gears grinding against some unnatural resistance. The net didn't come up, not even an inch, as though we'd snagged the very bottom of the sea. "Snag?" I asked, stepping to the edge. "No bottom out here," Henley muttered. His eyes had gone flat. "Too deep." The rope vibrated against my palms, humming with tension. Then it jerked, so sudden and sharp I nearly lost my grip. "Easy," Vaughan shouted, scrambling to the winch. The deck lurched. The whole goddamn boat leaned hard to starboard, wood groaning under strain. A cry went up from the others as we all staggered for footing. "It's pulling us," Marco bellowed. And it was. The net line strained so tight it sang, and the vessel shuddered as something massive below dragged us forward, tugging us out of alignment with the swell. The bow dipped, waves crashing over the rail and spilling cold salt water across the deck. "Cut it loose," Vaughan yelled. "Cut the line." Henley didn't move at first. His knuckles were white on the railing, eyes locked on the vibrating rope like he was staring into the eyes of whatever held it. Then, wordless, he grabbed the deck axe. I can still hear the sound. Steel cleaving rope, fibers snapping one by one until the last gave way. The tension released all at once. The net line whipped back like a freed serpent, slamming against the mast and leaving a deep welt in the wood. The boat rocked violently, and then silence. Only the hollow lap of waves against the hull, as though nothing had happened. For a long moment, none of us spoke. We just breathed, chests heaving, dripping with seawater and sweat. Marco broke the silence first. It was playing with us. "No," Vaughan said, shaking his head too fast, voice cracking. No, it was snagged. Just snagged, that's all." "Snagged doesn't pull a boat sideways," I said. My voice didn't even sound like mine. "That thing knew we were tied to it. It wanted us to feel it." Henley laid the axe back down, slow, deliberate. His face was unreadable, but I saw his hand tremble before he shoved it into his pocket. The ocean stretched flat and grey in every direction. Nothing moved. Not a fin, not a ripple. But I knew, deep in my gut, that something was still down there, still circling. And next time it wouldn't let go. Chapter 7. The First Assault. The night began the way so many others had. Salt wind cutting cold across the deck, ropes stiff with brine, the smell of fish and diesel heavy in the air. The sea was deceptively calm, black as coal and flat as glass beneath a fingernail moon. You could almost believe nothing waited below, if not for the memory of that slick shape breaking the surface 2 nights ago, the flash of muscle and scale too deliberate, too large to belong to anything we knew. No one said much as we set the nets. Even Reggie, who never shut up, worked in silence. The tension had grown to a rope pulled taut between us, and I could feel it in the way every eye flicked out to the horizon instead of the work in front of them. Around midnight, when the last net was set, the sea began to stir. It started as a low thump beneath the hull, not waves, not current, a weight against us. Then another harder. The boat shifted underfoot, the railing groaning. "Jesus Christ," muttered Frank, his cigarette trembling in his fingers. "That's no current." "Probably driftwood," Vince said, though his voice cracked around the words. "Big log, that's all." Another slam, harder this time. The entire hull lurched sideways, a metal-on-metal screech echoing up from below. The deckhands staggered, catching themselves on railings and coils of rope. My stomach lurched as if I'd been shoved by a hand the size of the sea itself. Then came the sound, an awful dragging, as though something was pulling itself along the keel. Wood and steel groaned in protest, and I swore I felt the deck vibrate beneath my boots. The nets shuddered. The lines went taut. "Goddamn it!" Reggie shouted, rushing to the stern. The winch screamed as the ropes pulled against it. "It's dragging the catch." We swarmed to the back of the boat, instinct driving us. The floodlights cut across the water, illuminating foaming churn and shredded spray. The nets were alive, not with fish, but with something pulling, something deliberate. I could see the ropes slicing down into the black, pulled with a strength that no animal had any right to possess. "Cut it loose," Frank barked. His face was pale, his lips pressed thin, but his hands shook as he reached for his knife. "No, no, no," Vince shoved him back. "That's half the goddamn haul. We lose that, we don't get paid, and you think the captain's going to cover our asses?" Another violent yank nearly pitched us overboard. The boat tilted, stern dipping down into the black more of the sea. Cold spray lashed our faces, blinding. "It's going to take the whole damn ship if you don't cut it," Reggie howled. In the glare of the floodlights, the water erupted. A wall of black flesh surged upward, impossibly fast. Not a fin, not a tail, something broader, thicker. I saw slick ridges, a glistening stretch of hide that broke the surface for only a second before slamming back down. The impact sent a shockwave across the boat, knocking Vince onto the deck. The floodlight flickered as seawater drenched it, sparking once before it steadied. No one spoke for several seconds. Just the sound of the sea boiling where the thing had broken through, the lines creaking under impossible strain. Finally, Frank spat, voice trembling. "That's no shark. That's no goddamn shark." The captain burst out of the cabin, shotgun in hand, eyes wild. He scanned the deck, then the nets, then the water. "Cut it loose," he ordered, voice iron. "Now, before it takes us down." There was no more argument. Knives flashed, ropes severed. The winch spun slack and the nets disappeared into the void. Freed, the boat righted itself with a sickening lurch, bobbing hard as if gasping for air. But just before the last of the shredded netting slipped beneath the waves, I saw it. An eye, large, dark, glistening like oil, and fixed on us. Not the nets, not the fish, us. The water closed over it, leaving only a bubbling eddy in its wake. The captain's face was pale as he lowered the shotgun. For the first time since I'd signed onto the vessel, I saw fear etched into the lines of his weathered face. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Only the sea, flat and endless, whispering back to silence. Chapter 8, Splintering. The morning after the assault carried with it no sunrise. Only a smear of weak grey light pressed between low clouds and a churning horizon. The sea had settled some, but the scars of the night remained gouged into the ship itself. Splintered planks of railing leaned outward like broken ribs. The nets, what was left of them, lay slumped in a tangle across the deck, shredded into ribbons, as though some great hand had pulled them apart strand by strand. And on the hull's starboard side, below the waterline, a set of long dents curved like claw marks had been pressed into the steel itself. Not scratches, indentations, as if something had gripped the vessel and dragged its weight. The crew moved about in silence at first, each man performing his tasks with the hollow precision of exhaustion. But soon, the silence began to crack. "Look at it," Harker muttered, crouching beside the torn nets. His voice was sharp, edged with the tremor of disbelief. "Nothing in the sea does this. Nothing. You hear me?" He raised his voice, gesturing wildly at the tatters. This wasn't a shark, wasn't a whale, this was deliberate. Creature spat over the side, unwilling to look. You're a fool if you think the ocean doesn't eat ships whole. She's always been bigger than us. This is just the sea reminding us. The sea doesn't slam the hull in the middle of the night. Harker snapped, eyes wide, sleepless. You felt it. We all felt it. It's not weather, it's not current, it's something alive down there. The captain finally emerged from his cabin, his face pale but set, as though carved in salt. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. We've come too far to turn back. Let's go over again at dusk. A ripple of unease moved through the men. One of the younger deckhands, Anders, nearly dropped the coil of rope he carried. Sir, with respect, we shouldn't stay. We've lost half our gear already. What if it comes back? It will come back, Harker cut in, his eyes fixed on Anders. You think that was chance? You think it was testing us? He glanced back toward the water, voice dropping to a low rasp. That was it playing with us. Arguments began to tangle, voices overlapping, fear pushing against denial, denial pushing against authority. Some demanded they turn back toward land, others insisted they stay, driven by debts or by pride. But no matter which way the words twisted, one truth pressed in from every side. They weren't alone out here anymore. That night, the men worked in pairs, every action quick and nervous. No one lingered by the rails alone. Every splash against the hull was flinched at, every shadow beneath the waves mistaken for the thing they half dared to name. Sleep became impossible. Some sat upright in their bunks, staring at nothing, rocking with the slow roll of the ship. Others paced the deck, muttering curses or prayers. And in the middle of it all, the captain kept to the wheelhouse lantern lit, unmoving, as though by standing watch he could command the sea into silence. But the silence didn't hold. It pressed thick and heavy, until every man could feel it vibrating in his teeth. The water was too still, the air too sharp. Something was circling again, unseen but undeniable, and the tension bound itself into their bones. And when the first knock came against the hull, softer this time, deliberate as a knuckle rapping on a door, half the men were already staring at the water, waiting. Chapter 9. The siege of the sea did not return to silence after the attack. It seemed to wait. The crew hardly slept. Every time someone drifted off in their bunk, they jolted awake at the scrape of wood against wood, or the groan of the hull as if something pressed its weight along the underbelly. At first it was spaced hours apart, then minutes, a constant prowling beneath them. At the chart table, lamplight etched long shadows across their faces. The arguments had burned down to mutters and venomous looks, but the decision was clear enough. They were stranded. The engines stuttered whenever they tried to push the boat toward shore, as if some weight dragged in the water behind them, an anchor of flesh and bone. Not nets this time, Faber whispered, wringing his raw hands. It's holding us. No one wanted to test it. No one wanted to lean over the rails again. Instead, they listened. The hours stretched thin. The lantern swayed, creaking on its hook, while outside the walls of water pressed close. Every so often, the boat listed gently to one side, as though nudged by a great body pacing circles beneath them. On the second night, they tried posting watches. The first pair lasted less than an hour before they shook the others awake, pale and sweating. It's looking in, the younger man stammered, unable to describe it better. His lips worked uselessly, trying to find words for what had risen just far enough to brush the surface. A face without clear outline, only a spill of pale matter that spread like a reflection in oil. By the third day, meals went untouched. The canned goods sat on the table unopened, while men gnawed fingernails down to bleeding stubs. Every sound was suspect. The slap of a wave against the side, the groan of timber shifting, even the roll of their own breath. At night, when the dark sea mirrored the sky, something larger than the vessel itself moved below them. Its passage swelled the water, tilting the deck until cups slid and shattered. And always it circled, never striking fully, never vanishing either. A siege in the truest sense. No wall to hide behind, no fortress to retreat into. Only a floating coffin, and the certainty that something vast was patient enough to wait them into madness. One man cracked first. Collar. He staggered to the stern under the dim watch of the others, muttering about baiting it, about proving it real, about making it show itself. Before anyone could wrestle him down, he pitched the bloody remnants of a fish bucket into the water, screaming curses. The sea accepted it in silence. For an hour, nothing stirred. Then, deep below, a pulse. A thud like a giant hand striking the hull from beneath. Another harder. The lamps rattled against their hooks. The siege was tightening. Chapter 10. The sea never rested that night. It rolled and shuddered like some vast, sleepless beast beneath the hull, its pitch and sway amplified by the weight of what pressed against them from below. Every lantern on deck strained against the wind, flames bent to snapping threads. Salt spray slicked the railings, and the Marlin's wake groaned with every lurch, her timbers rattling as though she were afraid too. The men had stopped whispering. Voices were no longer currency, they were weapon and shield both. Carl stood by the bow railing, his knuckles white, shouting curses at the black water as though trying to scare it back down. Mateo, still clutching the captain's revolver, muttered prayers in Spanish between every crack of thunder. Finch wouldn't move from the cabin door, hammering boards across it as if wood and nails might hold back what waited out there. And Bram had taken to pacing the deck in wide, trembling circles, his head low, lips split, eyes darting from the stern to the mast, to the rolling water below. "Listen," he hissed. "You hear it. It's not circling anymore. It's waiting. It's underneath." The thunder broke overhead, drowning his words, but I'd heard them. We all had. And we knew he was right. The thing had stopped teasing them. No more distant splashes. No more phantom knocks. What pressed now was silence. So complete it filled every crevice of the storm. It was a silence that made you ache to hear something, anything, until the sound finally came. A slam, hard, direct, a crack against the hull so violent the lanterns swung, and one of the men toppled against the rail. Then another, from beneath, from the side, from everywhere, like the ocean itself had sprouted fists and meant to batter them apart. The deck pitched, the mast screamed. Nets still coiled on the stern snapped tight with a sudden pull from the water, as if some invisible hand had seized them and yanked. The ropes burned through Carl's palms as he tried to cut them free, but the thing dragged with impossible strength, pulling the Marlin's wake sideways into the waves. "God Almighty, it's taking us," Carl bellowed. The storm howled louder, mingling with a sound none of them had ever wanted to hear. A cry that came not from the sea nor the sky, but from beneath the boards themselves. A groaning, hollow resonance that vibrated through their feet and into their bones. Mateo fired into the water, one shot after another, muzzle flashes cutting through the rain. The sea swallowed the noise, gave no answer. But then it rose. For the first time, they saw the breadth of it, not just a flicker of flesh or fin, but the full weight of its bulk heaving against the surface. Water sheeted away from a back longer than the boat itself, ridged and grey, broken by scars like pale rivers cutting through its hide. Its eye broke the waterline, a lidless orb luminous in the lightning, so vast it dwarfed the portholes. It regarded them, not with hunger, not with curiosity, but with something else entirely, recognition. Bram dropped to his knees. Finch screamed like a wounded animal, the sound tearing his throat raw. And before any of them could act, the thing struck. Its body slammed broadside against the Marlin's wake. Wood shrieked as boards splintered. The men staggered, clinging to anything they could grip. Lanterns shattered, flames swallowed by the rain. The nets dragged tighter, the stern sinking low, the sea beginning to pour over the deck. "Cut it loose!" Carl shrieked, though his hands were already bleeding, rope embedded deep in his palms. But it wasn't the nets anymore. It had them. The boat lurched so violently it felt as if the ocean itself had risen in revolt, a single black hand determined to drag them all down into its endless throat. And in that moment, under the wash of lightning, I swear, just before the water swallowed the deck, I saw the impossible. The thing's shape didn't end in fins or flukes. Its body shifted where it met the waves, as if something not of sea nor land tried to hold form within it. Like arms, like shoulders. A torso too human in the wash of rain, then gone again, back beneath the black churn. The storm consumed the rest. Chapter 11, Splinters on the Tide. The sea was all firelight and screaming. The lanterns swung wildly on their hooks, spilling arcs of yellow across the deck, illuminating panicked faces in brief, violent flashes. The Marrow's wake groaned, as though the beast had already pulled it half under. The hull shuddered, boards popping loose in a shotgun burst of splinters. Every slam from below rattled their teeth. "Pump! Pump the bilge!" Stroud barked, his voice breaking halfway through. He wasn't the Iron Captain anymore. He was just another desperate animal trying to survive. But the bilge wasn't going to save them. Water was pouring in faster than hands could scoop it. Buckets clattered uselessly on the deck, abandoned by men who realized it was too late. The next strike came from the starboard side. A wet, muscular thud against the hull, a shriek of wood. Then, an arm. No, a limb, pale and ridged, curving like the root of something ancient, slamming down on the deck. It was gone in a blink, slipping back into the dark, but its wetness remained, slicking the planks with slime. Jonas stumbled backward, eyes fixed on the stain. It's not supposed to," his words strangled off when the ship lurched. The beast rammed them broadside. The lantern toppled. Oil spilled and fire licked greedily up the rigging. In the light, they all saw it. A face, or the suggestion of one, rising in the foam. Lopsided eyes. A maw that opened too wide, glistening with teeth that seemed to shift shape as you looked at them. "God help us," one of the younger deckhands sobbed, dropping his harpoon as though it had burned him. It lunged. The boat listed violently, the mast cracking like a bone as it toppled into the water. Men scrambled to keep footing on the wet planks. The sea foamed red where the mast struck, though whether from injury to the creature or some poor soul caught in its grip, no one could say. Hands grabbed ropes, barrels, anything not nailed down, but nails were pulling free too. The Marrow's wake was coming apart under their boots. Elias found himself clinging to the railing, knuckles white, salt spray and smoke in his lungs. Through the roar of water, the slam of wood, the screams of men, he heard it, deep, resonant, almost human. A groan, like a voice dragging up through fathoms, drawn out on the air. Not a word, but a shape of one. The lantern fire caught the creature again, only yards from the deck. Its bulk blotted out the waves. A slick rise of body that kept on rising. One massive limb hooked the side of the ship and dragged it lower. The crew erupted, some thrusting spears down into the water, others abandoning all pretense of fighting and leaping into the Black Sea. "Hold fast," Stroud bellowed, though his own hands were trembling, his shirt plastered to his chest with sweat and seawater. The wake shrieked, boards tearing, ribs of the ship splitting apart. The timbers weren't just breaking, they were being pried apart, peeled open like a carcass. For Elias, there was no order anymore. No hierarchy, no captain, no crew. Just the frantic instinct to live another breath. Salt strung his eyes, but in the firelight and smoke, he saw it again. The creature's maw curling open, not toward the ship, toward him. And in that moment, Elias couldn't tell if it wanted to swallow him or speak to him. Chapter 12. The wake goes down. The wake had taken on a list, bow tipping into the black swell like a wounded animal forced to kneel. The hull screamed with every rise of the sea. Water surged across the deck, pouring into the gaps where the planks had been wrenched apart by claws and thrashing force. The boat was dying, its lungs filling, its spine snapping one groan at a time. Nathan was on his knees by the wheelhouse, blood running from his temple into his beard, clutching at the wheel as though steering meant anything now. Malik was screaming at him, words shredded by the storm. "She's gone. She's gone, man. Let it go." But Nathan clung on, muscles trembling, face locked in that grim rictus that had been carved deeper with each passing night. Somewhere in the dark water, the thing circled. It was no longer subtle, no longer patient. Every few breaths came the hollow thump of its body against the hull or the sharp clap of a hand or fin slapping wood. Then silence, then another strike. The monster was no longer interested in scaring them. It was playing with the carcass of the boat, worrying at it, savoring the collapse. The deck tilted harder. A crate slid past Malik and smashed against the rail, spilling coiled line and fishhooks into the froth. Jensen had gone quiet hours ago. His body slumped against the cabin, eyes half open, skin blanched to that pale, empty wax. Marta crouched beside him, whispering nonsense, clinging to his sleeve as if he were still listening. A sudden crack tore through the storm, louder than thunder. The mast bent, groaned, and toppled, ropes snapping like whips as it went. It plunged into the sea, dragging sails and rigging with it, a net of wood and canvas that slapped the surface like a snare. And then the water moved. It wasn't a wave. It wasn't the storm. It was bulk, colossal, breathing bulk, rolling up from beneath the keel. The wake lifted, tilted, then slammed down again, as if it had been dropped from the sky. The survivors screamed, clung to railings, clawed at whatever wood they could grasp. Nathan was thrown from the wheel. His body struck the deck with a wet crack, his voice snuffed into silence. The lanterns shattered, spilling fire that hissed and died in the encroaching flood. The ship was bleeding light, bleeding life. Malik scrambled across the deck, tried to heave Marta up, but she wouldn't leave Jensen. She wrapped her arms around him like a child refusing to leave her doll behind. Malik pulled harder, screaming in her face, but then the deck split, wood yawning wide beneath them, seawater bursting through. Marta's scream vanished under the crash. The wake was being devoured alive. The final blow came like a hand closing a coffin. Something surged up beneath the boat and rolled it. The world spun end over end, black sky, white froth, jagged wood. And then the sea swallowed all of it. Cold, crushing, infinite. Malik kicked upward, broke surface, coughed salt and blood into the wind. The wake was gone, reduced to splinters riding the swell. Shapes flailed in the water, 2, maybe 3 other figures, but the storm blurred them, dragged them apart. A scream carried over the surf, high and ragged, then choked off mid-breath. And then he saw it. Not a glimpse, not a flash. Its shape towered just beyond the swell, back-arched, limbs dragging through the water with obscene grace. The sea seemed smaller around it, as though bent to its mass. Its head tilted above the waves, and for the first time Malik saw its eyes, 2 pale orbs like moonlit stones, unblinking, fixed on him. The others vanished one by one, swallowed beneath the water with barely a ripple. Malik treaded water, breath tearing in and out of him, gaze locked to those eyes. He thought absurdly of the galley back on the first day, the stink of coffee and fish, the sound of Nathan's laugh. He thought of the warmth of a bunk, of land, of anything but this. But the sea gave him no reprieve. The thing moved closer. The swell lifted him, turned him, and as his body spun, he saw nothing but darkness below. Darkness and the certainty that something vast was waiting just beneath his feet. The storm roared, the waves closed, and the night swallowed his scream. You made it back for now, but the things in the dark never truly leave, do they? They watch, they wait, and perhaps they remember you now too. If you want to hear more, if you dare to listen again, step back into the shadows. Like the video, subscribe, but know this, some doors once opened do not close so easily.